For this experiment, you will need a microtiter plate, phosphate buffered saline.
Here, normally, whatever the ELISA will be using, like for diagnostics in the laboratories, the antigens or antibodies are pre-coated. But for practice, here in this particular case, the demonstration that whatever we are doing, the plate is empty, nothing is being coated. So you are creating your own plate, and you will be doing the ELISA by using that plate. Okay, so ELISA is generally enzyme-linked immunosorbent assay. Here, secondary antibodies are generally linked with some enzyme. So that enzyme, whenever you add that substrate for that enzyme, that will be cleaving that enzyme substrate, and it will give the color. So the secondary antibodies will be binding if there is an antibody over there. And different types of direct ELISA, indirect ELISA, sandwich ELISA, different kind of things are there. But basic to understand in immunology, basic to understand, we'll try to learn direct ELISA here.
You'll need a microtiter plate, phosphate buffered saline, antibody and antigen samples, a color changing substrate solution, a 37-degree incubator, an adjustable micropipette and tips, and transfer pipettes. Step 1. Label the microtiter plate and transfer pipettes as noted in the product literature. Step 2. Add 100 microliters of the antigen solution to all of the wells.
Yeah, this is the viral protein.
Step 3. Incubate for 5 minutes at room temperature. At this time, the antigens will non-specifically adhere to the plastic through hydrophobic and electrostatic interactions.
Generally in HIV, we'll be using glycoproteins. Different kits are available with various glycoproteins. 40, 80, 120. 120 is generally being used. So that protein, glycoprotein, when you add into the well, due to non-specific interactions, it will bind. But this binding will vary with the material. So we'll be using the plastic, whatever the ELISA plate is there, which is it will be binding strong with your glycoprotein material.
Step 4. Remove all the liquid from the wells using a transfer pipette.
Here, unbound whatever the
Step 5.
that is being removed.
Wash the wells by adding approximately 8 drops of PBS buffer to each well. Remove all the PBS from each of the wells, taking care to prevent the buffer from spilling over into adjacent wells. Traditionally, following this step, the wells are blocked with a protein-containing buffer to prevent non-specific interactions between the antibody and the plastic.
PBS with either skimmed milk powder, there is a casein, otherwise BSA. So what it will do, it will reduce the surface area for non-specific bindings. Only wherever the antigen has been binded, then there is a space for antibody binding only. The other sites will be blocked by using this blocking agent. There is a non-specific bindings will be eliminated by using skimmed milk powder or casein, BSA.
Wells. We have optimized this experiment to eliminate this step. Step 6. Add reagents as outlined in the product literature. Remember to use a clean micropipette tip.
The reagent in our case is the sample, the patient sample collected for HIV testing. If the patient is having HIV positive, he must be having antibodies. Those antibodies will bind with the antigen which is coated on the well. So if these two are binded, then your enzyme bind secondary antibody will be binding in that one. So here the reagent is our antibody.
For each reagent.
In the patient serum.
Step 7. Incubate the plate for 15 minutes at 37 degrees Celsius.
To promote antigen-antibody reaction.
Step 8. Remove the liquid from the wells using the appropriately labeled transfer
unbound
pipette.
Antibodies are being eliminated and
Step 9. Wash each well with fresh PBS. Remove the liquid using the transfer pipette designated for each sample. Step 10. Add 100 microliters of the secondary antibody to each of the wells. Step 11. Incubate for 15 minutes at 37 degrees Celsius. Step 12. While the samples are incubating, prepare the detection substrate as specified in the product literature. Step 13. Remove the secondary antibody solution from the wells using the transfer pipette designated for each sample. Wash each well once with fresh PBS buffer. Remove the liquid using the transfer pipette designated for each sample. Step 14. Add 100 microliters of the substrate solution to each well. Step 15. Incubate at 37 degrees Celsius for 5 minutes. Step 16. Examine your results. Differences between negative and positive samples will be obvious, with most positive samples turning brown in color. If color is not fully developed after 5 minutes, incubate at 37 degrees Celsius for a longer period of time.
Very simple. Here, this is the ELISA plate itself you are doing, and these are open type of ELISA plates. You can use it for any detection, any type of ELISA test you can do. But the thing is, you need to prepare. You need to have antigens in your hand. Antibodies will be collected from the patient. And see, nowadays in COVID case, we are detecting antigens as well as antibodies. Actually, for diagnosis, we are using antigens. So in this case, antibodies will be coated. Our kits are available. TrueNut kits now we are having. They are pre-coated with antibodies of this spike protein, membrane spike protein. And whenever you collect the patient sample, whether it's a nasal sample or blood sample, so this viral antigens, if they are there, they will be binding with there's an antibody which is pre-coated. Then you will be adding from other side. There are two methods here. One is competitive ELISA, where whatever the antibody first it is coated, it will be tagged with fluorescent. Then whenever your antigens goes and binds over there, this fluorescent tag will be overlapped, so the fluorescence gets reduced. That I will discuss in RIA. The same principle is being used. So in this TrueNut kits, what happens here? The fluorescence gets reduced as more number of the viral antigen spike proteins are binding over there. That is this is about ELISA, which is routinely being used in immunology and microbiology for diagnosis of various diseases. And now RIA, radio immunoassay. This is among the so far discussed immunological assays. This is going to be the most accurate method and highly sensitive method. Generally, we use it for estimation of viral compounds, hormones, vitamins, and thyroid. TSH, T3, T4, and B12, D, D3. Nowadays, these are being measured by RIA because their quantities in our blood are going to be very less. B12 is very less, and D3 is also very less. And nowadays, you can see the deficiency of B12 and D3 is very common, and it is associated with several metabolic and several immunological problems. And even COVID, it is reported that D3 deficiency is there in the people with high mortality with COVID. So it is one of the comorbid substance. So for these kind of important and highly sensitive and substances, we measure with radioimmunoassay. Here it is almost the principle is like your ELISA, but here only one difference is in ELISA. Here what happens? We are using fluorescent or enzyme tag. Fluorescent, even fluorescent, if you are using, it is called as luminescence assay. But in this case, RIA, your whatever the antibodies are there, the secondary antibodies are initial antibodies, they are coated with the radio-labeled compounds, radioactivity containing compounds. We'll see. We'll have a brief view about it. And in normal laboratories, we may not be able to do this RIA because we need a special permission for radioactivity handling.
we will learn one more immunological technique which is known as radioimmunoassay. So basically this technique is used to determine the concentration of antigen present in the sample. This antigen can be anything. It can be hormone, it can be serum protein, it can be drug molecule, or it can be vitamin. The technique was originally developed by Burson and Yalow in 1960. And for this work, they also received Nobel Prize in 1977. But unfortunately, after the death of Burson, this technique is so sensitive that it can detect 0.001 microgram of antigen per ml of sample. So let us see how this technique is actually performed. Let us assume we have a serum sample and we want to find out the concentration of A antigen present in that particular sample. If we wish to do this, we must have three things with us. First is anti-A monoclonal antibodies against the antigen. That is, this antibody will bind to A antigen present in the sample. These antibodies are generally prepared by hybridoma technology. If you wish to learn more about this technique, click on the link given in the description of this video. Second thing is radio-labeled A antigen, means some part of this antigen is made up of radioisotopes so that they can emit radiations like gamma or beta. Generally, heavy isotopes of hydrogen, that is tritium, or iodine 125 is used for this. And the last thing, same A antigen in unlabeled form, that is the original form. So these three things, that is anti-A antibody, radio-labeled A antigen and unlabeled A antigens, are very important if we want to find out the concentration of A antigen present in the sample. If we don't have these things, we cannot find the concentration. In the first step, a micro titer plate is taken and then it is coated with anti-A monoclonal antibodies. After this, radio-labeled antigens are added to the well, but in the excess quantity. Now what will happen if the concentration is kept high? Since there are large number of antigens, all the antigen binding sites of antibodies will be saturated by the antigens. No antibody will be left free. As you can see, some radio-labeled antigens are left unbound. They are not bound to the antibodies. So in the next step, these unbound antigens are removed with the help of washing. See, what is the situation now? There is a well coated with the antibodies and all the antibodies are bound to the radio-labeled antigens. And therefore, let us assume the radioactivity of antibodies or present on the antibodies is 100%. Since all the antibodies have radio-labeled antigen, this is very important. Radioactivity in the antibodies or well is 100%. After this, a very small but known amount of unlabeled antigen is added to the well, say 1 nanogram. So we have added 1 nanogram of unlabeled antigen to the well. What is the effect of this? This addition will create the competition between radio-labeled and unlabeled antigen for binding antibodies. And this competition is proportional to the concentration of unlabeled antigen added to the well. Since we have added only 1 nanogram of antigen, competition will be less and few radio-labeled antigens will be removed from the antibodies. And of course, their place will be taken by unlabeled antigens. After this, the well is again washed to remove unbound antigen, whether it is labeled or unlabeled, but unbound antigens. Now what is the situation this time? Number of radio-labeled antigens bound to the antibodies are decreased due to the addition of unlabeled antigens. and hence the radioactivity present on the antibodies is not 100%. So we will write here, when unlabeled antigens were not added to the well, that is 0 nanogram, radioactivity was 100%. Okay, when 1 nanogram of unlabeled antigens were added, it decreased due to the competition, and let us assume it decreased by 90%. Actually the 10% decrease, it became 90%. Now tell me, what will happen if we repeated all the process again, but by increasing the concentration of unlabeled antigen? First let me write the things here. So first we added 0 nanogram of unlabeled antigen and radioactivity was 100%. Then we added 1 nanogram of antigen and radioactivity became 90%. Now tell, what will happen if we further increase the concentration of unlabeled antigen, say 2 nanogram? Yes, the radioactivity will further decrease, and it will be proportional to the concentration of unlabeled antigens added to the well. So if it became 90% for 1 nanogram, it may decrease to 80%, right? What about 3 nanogram? Yes, it will decrease to 70%. So every time we have to keep on increasing the concentration of unlabeled antigen and monitor the decrease in the radioactivity. So let me write the whole data here. So for 4, 60, for 5, 50, 40, 30. This is just an example, the actual values will be different. Now tell me what you see. Is there any relationship between unlabeled antigens added to the well and radioactivity? Yes, there is. And we can draw a linear graph using this data, correct? So let us draw it like this. Remember, we have not used sample yet. Don't forget, we have to determine concentration of A antigen present in the sample. Now the time of sample. We have to do all the steps again. We have to again take microtiter plate, then coat it with the monoclonal antibodies, then again add the excess amount of radiolabeled antigen, but we will not add unlabeled antigen this time. Instead, we have to add this sample. See, there are A antigens present in the sample, but we don't know the concentration. But according to the concentration, they will compete with the radiolabeled antigens and will remove them from the antibody. Now we have to just check the radioactivity. Say radioactivity on the antibodies is now 40%. Here we know that if we added the sample, it will decrease the radioactivity to 40%. And this value will tell us the concentration. We have to extrapolate this value on standard graph like this and see, it will tell us the concentration. It is 6 nanogram. So our sample contains 6 nanogram of A antigen. So in this way, radioimmunoassay is used to detect